about her and her process and see some of the work that she has up in her exhibition called Reflections. Naomi is from rural Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and she was born into a family of laborers. These included farmers and nurses, seamstresses, bar owners, woodworkers, and more. She started using her hands at a very early age, and she began to play with tools and see how they worked, and began to create objects out of a variety of media. She frequently moved from home to home, and she became accustomed to the cycle of moving, of tearing down walls, building additions, the redecoration, and the personalization. And so it was through these frequent transitions that the importance of applying her ornamentation and aesthetic led to a sense of space that said it was home. So now I'm going to turn it over to Naomi so that she can tell you a little bit about her artwork. We have Rachel, who's behind the camera, and we have Jenny, who are helping us with our technology tonight. And here is Naomi.
Good evening, everyone. First, I would love to thank Lori for inviting me to actually have an exhibition here at the Prairie Renaissance Cultural Alliance Gallery in downtown Morris, Minnesota. Morris, Minnesota is a great little rural community, and actually driving here today for the Artist Talk, I got to be reminded about harvest. And I come from, a family of farmers, which are actually just about 40 minutes down the road here in Tinta, where my family farm is, and everyone is in the thick of harvesting right now. So it was a really great treat to be able to drive down here and to see everyone working in their fields, and to really remind me about where my roots are and where I come from. And I do want to thank Lori as well, because we first initially met at the Rural Arts and Cultural Summit here in Morris about 6 or 7 years ago now it's been. And then I've had the honor of working with Lori as well, where she did take the Work of Art series when I was teaching that for Springboard for the Arts. And so we've created this relationship as artists and also now as friends. And I just thank you very much, Lori, for offering this. Thank you. Well, a little bit more about myself is that at a very young age, I have always been interested in creating and drawing. And by kindergarten, I was actually drawing in 3D. And actually, one of my first grade teachers has my first sketchbook. And so at a very young age, my parents were already encouraging me to be a maker and a creator. And so with my mother being interested in fashion and design, and my father being a carpenter, and my grandfather, who is also a farmer as well in Tinta, was a furniture maker in the winter times when he was not in the fields. And so I was always around makers. And then my grandmother, which is my mother's mother, was actually a nurse and a seamstress and made all of us grandkids and also my mother and her sister and brother all their clothing. And what's really great about that is that I got to see her make patterns. And she made these patterns from newspaper and also newsprint and created these fabulous clothing that we aesthetically dressed ourselves in. And some of my favorite pieces when she actually made us Zumba pants. And she actually had a label created that said "Made with Love" by Grandma Ramona that she put on the very front of the pants instead of it saying Zumba. And my favorite pair was the metallic gold that I got one year. And so as we continue to go through looking at the work, and as I talk about it, I want you to remember about the makers that I grew up with, and also about these special patterns that I saw continuously as well. And within my grandparents' home out on the farm, which I was mostly at almost every other weekend or every weekend because both of my parents worked full time, I would go out to my grandparents' place and stay with them, and they had the most beautiful Baroque style velvet wallpaper. In red and black with golds and silvers behind it. And I would actually sit behind my grandmother while she was in her chair saying the rosary, and I would feel the patterns of this wallpaper, and it's just been a part of who I am. And also you'll see how patterns are within my work as well. To get started, I want to remind everyone that I've been trained because I have been able to go to undergrad school, where I attended at Minnesota State University in Moorhead, where I practiced in sculpture and met my first mentor, who was Chris Walla. And Chris Walla was the sculptor professor and still is at MSUM. And I was very thankful that he was the one who had started mentoring me at my young age in my undergrad career, and actually helping me realize how I could use mixed media and pushing me as well to push my limits as being a maker. And then for graduate school, I attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where again, I continued my passion in sculpture and also performance art. And my mentors that I would like to credit for that is Aristotle Georgiadis and also Gail Simpson, who I had the privilege of working with one-on-one for my graduate show, and then also as their studio assistants as well. So this is a little bit more about my background and who I am. And then we're going to actually start looking at the work, and we're going to be talking about the work. And we're going to go all the way back to 2004, where we're going to start. And this is a piece right over here, which is a piece that I created in 2004. The title of the piece is called Take a Piece. And this is actually a casting of my own head. It is a gumball machine. Because of COVID, we're not putting any gumballs in the machine right now. And this was done in undergrad, where I had an actual casting made out of alginate of my head. And then there was 2 parts for the head casting. And then also we did separate castings of my ears. And when we were doing these castings, I only had 2 straws coming out of my nose, and I actually had earplugs within my ears. And so when we had these 2 parts and the ears casted, what I did after that is I created a mother mold as well to do the last wax process. And then with that burned out the last wax and then poured in the bronze to have 4 separate pieces. And so this is where I had to come in then and actually weld the head together here, and then also around each ear. And then I very carefully had to go in with a cutoff wheel to actually cut the mouthpiece out. And then I had a friend of mine named Jack, who I met in Moorhead, who was an engineer. And I told him what I was doing, and he actually helped me make up the actual inners to create it so that you can load the back of the head with gumballs, and then you pull out the mouth, and then it drops down into your hand. I also knew that I wanted a fun retro candy stand. And so I was looking at different styles of different types of candy stands that they had out there. And I really didn't find anything that I liked. And so I wanted to design one myself. So I went and bought different sizes of tubing and actually created the layering of this to make it look like it's kind of kaleidoscope style, and wanted it to be candy apple red, to really have it pop and to make people think about the gumball machine. This piece is one of the many bronze pieces I did in undergraduate, where I was really fortunate because Minnesota State University of Moorhead has a fantastic foundry and wood. Last wax process. So with having this opportunity with an undergrad, I was able to learn about bronze and actually how to weld bronze, and then also welding the metal together with MIG and TIG in undergrad. My next piece that I would love to go on to is another. And this is actually a casting of my grandparents' rotary phone, which is candy apple red as well. And that phone was in the family room on the farm. And we would always talk on the phone to friends and families. Also, when we would call our grandparents, they would talk to us on that phone as well. And so after my grandmother's passing and after my grandfather left the family farm, one of my requests was to actually have this telephone and to make a casting of it. Because this phone was a connection that I had with my family. I loved to play with the rotary. And not only that, I can still remember the sound as you actually turned the dial and it clicked, and then you'd hear it go all the way back. That was one of the funnest things I actually found out about this functional object. And so this was, again, me at a young age being influenced by objects, by the color of them, and also by the functionality of it. This piece was in the Plains Art Museum gala this year, and I actually entered the piece in January and did not know about COVID. And so when this piece was actually on exhibit and online, it was kind of an eye-opener for me about how the title of the piece was One Lifeline to Another, and actually having the oxygen mask on the telephone, because there have been people throughout the world who have only been able to communicate with their families through the telephone as they are actually in the hospital or in ICU. And for me, that was really powerful to actually have that coincidence happen with this piece during that time. And for me, this is a very sentimental piece as well, because this is a casting of the telephone that I had a connection with my grandparents, which have both passed now. And we're going to move over here to this photograph. This was a collaboration with Eric Sandfire, who is a photographer from Fergus Falls, Minnesota as well, and also a good friend of mine. And we did a proposal for a call where in Fergus Falls at the PRCA Gallery, which is another regional art gallery in Minnesota here in central Minnesota, where they wanted artwork made with kale and to have creativity. And so for me, with my performance work and also with making 3D objects and also thinking of the human body as a landscape, this is where I came up with this idea of actually creating these kale masks. And for this to happen, I actually had to get up at 5 a.m. and start creating these masks out of the vegetation. And then myself and 3 other models came to my parents' property. And then Eric had his camera, and we started documenting this process of wearing these kale masks on the human body and doing them in different locations. And for me, this was my self-portrait as to how I created this mask to identify with myself. And also to create something that speaks to who I am. And the thing that I really like about this piece is that if you get really close and if you see it in person, you can actually see that my eyes are actually more of an orange color instead of a brown color. And I feel that happens to pop more because of the purple kale leaves in it, and to recognize that. And that's something that is, I feel, is unique about me. And a lot of times when I'm having conversations with people, people will actually mention that they can actually say, your eyes aren't really a brown, they're really an orange. Which you'll see orange is a theme within my work as we continue to go around the room as well and talk about the work. These masks did start to decay. that evening. And so it was more about ephemeral work and about creating these ephemeral masks that we could wear from vegetation, and to create a series of work that had a time and a period and then actually died off after that. Now we're going to move over into this section here. And remember when I was talking about that velvet wallpaper that I used to actually run my fingers over the pattern? Well, this is actually a pattern from that velvet wallpaper that is at my grandparents' farm. And I created this pattern to have an object that speaks to you through color, pattern, and then also pattern again with pattern on pattern. The title of this piece is called Blue Fusion. And this is representing who I am as an artist, of using this velvet itself to create these objects, and then also using shape, which I saw continuously growing up. And that is one of the things that I love to create and work with, is color and shapes, as we can continue to go through the exhibition here as I'm talking about the work. And for some of you who know me as well, I just purchased a house last August of 2019, and was absolutely thrilled that I could go in and paint my walls with color. And there's blues, and there's also reds. My kitchen is it's a bright, vibrant red as well, which I just love. And so being able to have that space again, I'm going in and changing it and modifying it to fit who I am as a person, and also how I love to use color and pattern. Then this piece right over here is from 2018 as well. And this title of this piece is called Shellac. This is an actual found object of a turtle that I found out on property that I was living on out by Underwood. I do shed hunting in the winters as well. And so actually finding this turtle shell, and it had been ran over by a vehicle, there was something about it that spoke to me about how I needed to create a new life for this turtle shell. And so I took the fragmented pieces as well that were broken from it being ran over, and then created my bulbous forms as well, which is another pattern and series within my work in my earlier years, to create this new growth. And you will see that there's fleece and there's also velvet in the piece. And then there are actually deer teeth that I found a deer head close to the turtle shell as well when I was out walking on the property. And I wanted to give it this new type of bodily feeling. And so that's where I integrated the turtle shell and also the deer teeth. And then this is horsehair from my horse that was named Jazzy. And she needed a trimming. And so this is where I was going to incorporate her horsehair as well to create this new piece that talks about regrowth and creating new life. And then this piece here is a small section of a larger installation. And so to fit in with the gallery walls, I chose one of the top pieces of this actual installation. And the title of this piece is called Solitude. And this is in honor of my grandmother, who passed away when I was very young. And I wanted to create something that made me think about her as well. And again, in her bedroom, she had the red velvet wallpaper. And this is a pattern from that wallpaper as well. And I wanted to create the white in the piece to actually talk about her and her presence, and how she was the actual glue that held everything together for our family. And actually, is and who she was. Right over here. You should be fine. So these two pieces right here are from 2019. And this is in collaboration with my daughter, Zara, who at the time was only 2.5 years old. And what I did is, she has always been with me within my studio when I'm making and creating. And so she is learning from me and I'm learning from her. And what I decided to do with these pieces is I provided her with paint and also a paintbrush. And I just let her experiment. And she was in the process of making circles. And so she started making these orange circles and green circles, and then she started creating this great movement with her paintbrush. And so I let the paint dry, and I came back in with these ink gel pens and wanted to add more movement and definition into the piece as I watched how she created these circles and created these movements, and I wanted to define that. I wanted to capture the movement and also the shapes that she was creating to highlight how she was using the brush and making it move. And then the title of this piece is called Minnesota Nice. Because if you actually step back and look at this, it is in the shape of Minnesota, which we did not know until after it was created. And so that's where I titled it Minnesota Nice. This piece right here, again, I wanted to give her the opportunity to use a large paintbrush and to use movement and go over the page and create the circles and these different variations of line. And so when she was done with the paint, I let it dry. And I came back in with the color choices that I wanted to do to highlight those brush marks and those movements and those shapes. And this is where she was really excited about this piece because she just felt that there was so much energy, and she absolutely loved how I actually brought in the gold color with it. And for me, this is more about her learning about space and shapes and also color as well. And she's actually starting to love color like how I love color. So it's a great little relationship that we're building together with our collaborative work. What's really funny about this is that these both hang in my bedroom. And the night that I returned after delivering the work here, she was very upset that these were gone. And she wanted to know where they were and if they were coming back and when they were coming back. So she has grown an attachment to these pieces, and still to this day, we're collaborating together and making work. And it's been a great connection and a great tool for her to use her motor skills, and also for me to get work done. I've realized that when I need to get into my studio and I need to get something done, she needs to have her studio space. So in the basement where my dry studio is, that is where I've created a little corner for her where she has her easel. She also has her table. She has her own acrylic. She has her own watercolors. She has her own brushes. And she sits there and paints and draws while mom's working as well. So it's been this great relationship. And not only that, her motor skills and everything has fully developed, and she's doing really wonderful. I could go on and on about that, but it's a great relationship. And I get work done, which is really important. We're gonna jump over here for this piece over here. And this piece is from 2019 as well, and it's called Surface. And as Lori talked about earlier, about how as growing up as a child, my parents were flippers before flipping was even a thing. And I lived in 13 different homes growing up. In all those homes, my parents did some type of remodeling, some type of decorating, putting their own aesthetics on it. And also me being fortunate enough to learn how to frame out a wall, how to do drywall, how to mud, and then also how to pick out color choices and patterns, which my mother was always really great at. And she was totally a fashion diva as well. And so having those influences has been really important to me. And so I wanted to create a piece that spoke of home. And so this is cedar siding. And I wanted to create a fragment of what I remember of actually building and thinking about home, and how when you actually live in a place for a year or two, or maybe even sometimes we stayed there for 5 years, you actually made that a piece of who you are. And so with me actually making this piece called Surface and making it into a fragmented piece, this is speaking to how every time that we left a home, I took a piece of that home with me, a piece of how I'm creating my work now, and how I'm able to use different types of mediums to create, because of having my dad as a carpenter and my mom as, you know, a fashion and loving design, and my grandmother making clothes from patterns, and my grandfather making furniture for family and also other community members in need. This is something that I wanted to create. And so I also have these little rubber bulbous forms, which is about growth, and about creating something, you know, that you can see the smaller pieces, and then there's the medium and the bigger size pieces. So it's about growth and about how we continue to grow and continue to move from place to place. And so this piece for me is about taking a fraction of who I am as growing up as a child and moving from place to place, and then also incorporating my love for contemporary design and also contemporary colors to make it really pop and to talk about who I am. We're going to move over to my most current piece, which is called Social Reflection. And before COVID hit, I was having a mental block. It was really hard for me to create and to even find validation in creating. So you could kind of say I was in an art's funk. And I was still drawing, I was still sketching, but there was just something that wasn't speaking to me like I really wanted to be making my work. So once COVID hit in March and I was at home with my daughter and working from home, I actually started thinking about what is happening within our communities, within our society, within the world. And that how everything was being turned upside down, and us not knowing what was going to happen or how we were going to function as Zara and I as a family, with me working at home, her staying at home with me, to even being secluded from our friends and family who we love. And so for me, I wanted to create something to capture that moment and to think about it. And my best friend, Carl Zachman, who is also a collaborator with me as well, he gave me this actual convex mirror that he saved. And he was all like, I really think you can use this. And he was absolutely right. This is where I was thinking about the mirror and how us not knowing what was going to be happening, or knowing if any of us are carrying COVID, because some people can have, you know, asymptomatic symptoms. And so creating something that would reflect on who we are as a society and who we are as people. And so I wanted to use this mirror to actually capture that and to create this COVID piece where I have nails and also earplugs that I use within my studio with all of my noisy equipment, and wanted to use these to create things that were soft, but then also hard. Because if you actually look at the structure of COVID, it's a fatty cellular molecule type of thing, cell, and it has little spikes off of it. And the reason why that you need to wash your hands and to use soap is because it breaks down that fatty cellness of it and destroys the actual germ, the virus. And so I wanted to create this piece by using the nails and also the foam pieces to create those two different textures. And then not only that, when people see this piece, of course, they would have to be wearing their mask as they tour the gallery and see the work. And they're looking into the piece itself, wondering who they are, what's happening now, what's going to happen in society, and really thinking about that, and even contemplating what is this virus and what's going to happen. And that's where I came up with the idea of the social reflection. And this was on display at the Rourke Museum for the Midwest Rural Invitational. And what magically started happening is that people were taking selfies with us and sending me images. And the museum also told me too that people were attracted to this piece, were taking photographs with it and sending it to other people. And so it's the curiosity of it, which also too, like we're all curious as to what's going to happen, what is going to be the new normal. And so creating this piece was actually I had a mental block. Let me back up. I had a mental block, and then something happened. And I wanted to create this piece, and I wanted to create it for the Rourke's Invitational. And it came together, and ever since then, my creativity has sparked. It's made me realize how using different mediums and really thinking about what's happening within the world right now, I'm continuing to work in different types of mediums and creating new work. Right now, I was really fortunate enough to be one of the chosen artists for Smart Growth America and also Forecast Public Artworks, where I am partnering with West Central Initiative. And I am one of the 5 artists that was chosen to be creating a toolkit for West Central Initiative to be using for safe routes to school for kids within the 9 counties that West Central Initiative facilitates and also serves. For me, I wanted to jump on this opportunity because not only that, in my practice, I've always done creative placemaking as well throughout my undergrad and graduate career and after graduate school too. And really jump into this because right now is a time where kids are going to school. They are walking or riding or taking the bus. And not only with COVID, there are so many layers to this, but actually creating work that is going to help them get to school safely is a great opportunity. And I cannot wait until that is shared, which I'm in the process this week of doing those installations within the communities. And so this week has been really powerful for me. And I'm really excited as to what is happening for other artists nationwide, and that we're finding different ways to be sharing our work, as per se how we're here right now, wearing masks and in the gallery and doing this online, where I have friends and families who are able to join nation and also worldwide right now, as I've seen who's been joining. So with that, I would love to take any questions. I could continue to talk, but I would love to know if anyone has any questions about my process or about any pieces or what's next for me. Those questions. And I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to join us tonight too, and to listen to me talk about my work and about my process and where I've come from and where I'm at right now.
Hi, Naomi. This is Rhoda Smith, and I just wanted to ask if I'm sort of following what you're telling us. What I think I'm hearing is you talking about the earlier works being very personal, really connected to your grandparents and your own experiences, and then sort of evolving to the piece that you're standing next to, and ones that you're talking about that seem to be about broader social issues. And I guess I'm just wondering, is that how it feels, or am I just sort of putting my own spin on that?
No, thank you very much for observing that. Because for me, a lot of my earlier work was more about my personal experiences and where I've come from, and about the community that brought me up as to being the makers, and also my huge supporters. And when I was creating the earlier work too, I was really trying to learn about process and technique, and learning about different materials as to welding, woodworking, mold making, working with fibers. And I've always drawn and painted, so that was me getting my skill set and me understanding what I'm capable of doing. And so you are absolutely right now. I'm looking more at the social lens of what's happening within society, and actually asking these questions and making people feel uncomfortable, to really push those buttons and to make people really think. My work is very contemporary. It's not your traditional fine artwork. And for me, some of my best clients have actually been contemporary collectors, or even businesses who have purchased my larger velvet wall pieces to hang in office spaces or meeting rooms, because not only are they visually pleasing, they also absorb noise because they have padding and they have the fabric on them. So they function in two different ways. Really great question and great observation on that.
Jennifer would like to add that the collab work with you and your daughter is very sweet.
Thank you. It's been something that she tells me that I'm the teacher, and she tells me that I'm a very good teacher. But for me, I'm learning from her again. Because with me going into academia and being trained and thinking about processes, she hasn't done that. And so for me, when I would give her the paint brushes or the colored pencils or watercolor right now, she's showing me about movement and about shapes. And she's creating these compositions that are really freeing and fun to look at. And the use of color for her is something that she really enjoys too. And what's been really great too is that my partner, Star Wallowing Bull, he is painting with my daughter as well. And so she's getting artistic input from two different artists. And it's something that I think is really going to be beneficial for her in the future. But I really feel that my daughter is going to be an engineer. She is a problem solver, and she loves to build things and to make connections. And now she's drawing like these map details of like rooms and objects, and they have movement in them. But I also think it's because she's being influenced by one of the people that I'm actually working for right now part-time, Jeff Zachman, who is a kinetic artist, and also Carl Zachman, who's a kinetic artist as well. And so she's getting it from everyone. And so for me, I'm very thankful that she's able to be around people who are nurturing her and really are creators and makers, because I don't believe in the tablet. I don't believe in screen time. I believe in actually using your hands, doing the movement, getting up and doing things is helping our brains develop. As human beings, it challenges us, it makes us reroute how we think, and creates us into being problem solvers. So if she wants to be an artist, I'll support her, but I really think she's going to be an engineer. Keeping my fingers crossed. So. Anyone else with any questions?
I have a question. So Naomi, I see a lot of playing happening here, and we know as artists that if you're not playing, then you're not experimenting and you're not having fun. And that's sort of the beauty of being an artist, that you get to play and experiment and try new things and get surprised and investigate new materials. What sorts of things are next? What are you exploring right now?
Right now, I'm actually exploring about getting out into physical landscape of communities and creating installations that are going to be beneficial for kids, but also talking about equity and talking about kids understanding who they are and about their community, and creating a safe space for kids to be. And so I don't want to share a whole lot of what I'm working on for the process right now, but it's very much community. It's very much community development, community creative placemaking, and creating this work that is going to speak volumes in many different ways, in very subtle ways, but through play again, by using color, using pattern, and creating something that's inviting and playful for them to feel safe, and then also to learn about things. And because you're absolutely right, by playing and doing things, you're learning. And that's one thing that I continuously try to do for my daughter with that. And I think art is a really great way for kids to understand that. I am also planning on to continue to create these COVID pieces as we're in the throw of this right now. And some of them will be pushing some of the boundaries, political and also within communities. And I'm okay with that because it's going to be questioning some things as to how we are as a community and how we're moving forward during this global pandemic.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Yep. Naomi? Oh,
Yes.
we got a freeze there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to check in and ask you, you know, so much. I was fortunate to get to see you work through grad school and see how your work, how you changed it as an artist or grew as an artist with that. The things that I was always impressed with was your foray into performance art. I never had the guts for it. You dove in and went after it. I'm wondering, what are you doing these days that brings that performative quality into your work? While certainly right now it's difficult, but you also have the opportunity to videotape, you know, to video and to create productions. Are you still pursuing the performative quality, the performative aspect?
And I have to ask, is this Chris Hindle?
That's it.
Hi, Chris.
Yes, it is.
Much love to you.
Hi.
Great question. Well, for some of you who do not know, I am a full-time artist right now. For the past 7 years. I was working for Springboard for the Arts as the artist development director for artists real wide in Minnesota. And so a lot of my time and energy was focused on that. And so now with me actually having this time to be a full-time artist, it is something that I do want to get back into, Chris. It is a passion of mine, and you are absolutely right. In graduate school, I dove right into it. Had a great professor, Doug Rosenberg, and so it was something that was really beneficial for me. And I will say this is that also coming back to my roots and to my home and being in a rural community, there have been some ways that I have done performance art, but not how you used to see it, Chris, in graduate school. And so for me, that is something that I do want to get back into and actually start videotaping this and sharing it with others, because it is something that I do miss from my practice. And and I think that as I continue to do that, I just think that my own personal growth as an artist then is going to continue to grow as well. I'm always open to things changing and modifying, and I want to challenge myself with my work and who I am as a mother, as an artist, and also as a community member with growing up in a rural community. So this has been something that's been on the front of my lobe of thinking about what is it that that I can do, and also too, what is it that I'm going to feel comfortable with, because with living in a more rural community, there are some challenges with that, but also too, at the same time, I feel like there are certain things that need to be done and voices to be raised and to be said. I shared with Lori that my nickname in my family is called Stir Stick, because I always stir things up, I guess, in my family. So it's a part of who I am. So thank you, Chris, for reminding me of that.
This gave you another thumbs up.
Awesome. I can't see any of you, so I don't know who's on. I don't know who's here. But please. That was a really great question, Chris, and please ask away. I know Lori has one.
Exhibition here, and the first thing I was drawn to were your velvety pieces, and I just wanted to touch them, right? And then I remember my own children who were actually along, and then I was like, no, you can't touch them because then they'll be touching them. And it makes me think, like, how do you organize your studio so that you can have these pristine velvety pieces, and you have like power tools and sawdust and things? So how do you organize your studio so that you can have both, like the fine art pieces and the construction-y pieces? And then how do you keep your kid out of it, right? Like, I struggle with this on a daily basis. So how does that work?
Great question. And before I reference talking about my dry studio space, and that is actually where in my basement, where I do my fabric work. And so all of the cutting of the wooden stuff I do out in my garage, where I have my woodworking tools. And then also too, for the past 2.5 years now, Zachman Studios has let me actually go to their studio space and utilize it to be working on the metal work that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So I'm very fortunate to have that connection with them to be able to do that. And so to answer your question is, I have to keep those separate. And then once I've completed a velvet piece, I actually have to wrap it up in heavy duty plastic and seal it so that it stays clean, moisture doesn't get into it. And then I store it on slots or on pallets too, so that they lay flat. And then for Zara, talking about how she wants to be involved and do things, is that I always have to give her a piece of what I'm working on. So she has to have a section or a piece, being when I'm painting or drawing, or when I'm actually downstairs working on sculptural stuff. She has to have a piece of the fabric, or she has to have a piece of the wood, and she creates her own thing. So we've learned that connection, and then sometimes she has gotten into my artwork, and it's been not destroyed, but it's been altered, as I like to say. And so typically when it's time for her to go to bed or it's a nap time, that's when I go down and actually take the time to fix it or refine it, so that I can rework it and it'll be okay. A lot of times when I'm doing my large scale installations, though, being in gallery spaces where I go in, paint the walls, even build structures too within galleries, that typically takes me anywhere from 2 to 4 days to do that type of install, and then bringing in the wall relief pieces and also the sculptural pieces. And so when that process happens, that's when my grandma, my mom, has to step in, and she really has to help me take care of Zara. And then also my partner Star as well has helped, where when I have to go and do these installations or artist talks, and or even going to do other things for the arts as well, that's where having their help, and it takes a village to raise a kid, which we all know. So I'm very fortunate to have that village, and that I can actually keep her busy and occupied while I'm making. So yeah, great question.
Jessica Story would like to add that this exhibit is so engaging in person. She's had the pleasure of experiencing it, and just wants to ask how long it will be up at the gallery for others to enjoy. So it is up until October 17th. We are open Thursdays from 10 to 6 p.m. and then Fridays and Saturdays from 10 to 2 p.m. So you really have to see this in person if you haven't yet. And if you're you know, in West Central Minnesota, it's definitely worth the trip to go see it. It's really excellent, and we're really lucky to have you here, Naomi. It's been great to have really wonderful art here.
Thank you.
During COVID times.
And one thing that I do want to just talk about briefly is where Lori was talking about the actual velvet and wanting to touch it. You have to remember, when I was a child, that was the thing for me. It was actually feeling that texture of the velvet wallpaper. And so creating that tension of you knowing that you're in a gallery space or a museum and that you want to touch this work, that's the tension that I want to be there. That's the inner kid in us that we want to feel it. We want to see what it feels like. And so again, it comes into that aspect of play. And I love it because a lot of times I will go into exhibitions or gallery spaces and not really tell people who I am, and just kind of observe until they figure out who I am. And then I'll be like, yeah, you can totally touch it. And they're all like, really? And then they just lightly touch it, and they're all like, thank you so much. And especially with little kids. When I made a couple of pieces for the Madison Museum, the Children's Museum in Madison, I made them some very textural, heavy fabric pieces, and then also created this great hanging piece as well out of actual billboard signs. And they were hanging from the ceiling, and there was an actual punching mechanism that could actually go hit them, and they'd move back and forth. And I made sure that there were letters and also vibrant colors. So it's always about the play, like you said, and always wanting to touch things. And this white piece, a lot of times people are afraid to handle it or even hang it because they're afraid of getting it dirty. But for me, I'm curious how this piece is going to age over time. Because again, it's talking about the solitude of it, and the remembrance as well of my grandmother. So I want that tension there. I want that play there. So it's great that you actually brought that up, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit more.
Also, I just wanted to add that Christy wanted to thank you for sharing your thoughts about your work. She enjoys your work very much. And Bethany says, your work is amazing, Naomi. And she says she loves seeing your work and learning about the thought and relationship behind the pieces.
Thank you. Thank you everyone again for joining us tonight, and for actually, thank you for coming to see the work, Jessica. That's great that you could actually see it and then hear me talk about it. That makes me really happy. Thank you.
And then we have one more question from Leanne.
Oh, that's my mom.
Leanne, feel free to type that in the chat box, or if you'd like to turn your camera and mic on, you can do that as well, whatever works for you. Oh, a question from Star.
Okay, there, now you can talk. Oh, hi, Naomi.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, sir.
I would like to.
Hey,
She's been
Mama.
going nuts here trying to talk to you. Okay, Star has a
Okay.
question.
Okay. I have a question. I know we talked about a collaboration we wanted to do together. I know we talked about it about a year and a half ago. You remember that project?
Yes.
It's one of my warped red owls that I want to design, but you're gonna make it in like velvet. Is that something that we are still gonna consider in the future?
Most definitely. Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. I was just checking. So yeah, that's it.
Now you have to in
Great.
front of
No,
everybody.
that's why
Yeah.
we're doing
Yeah.
this. We're doing this so that- No, it's on
All of
record
us
that
will
I
hold
said
you
this, and
accountable.
now we're-
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to it. So thank you.
So do I. Thank you.
Is there any other questions for Naomi?
And make sure to mute the mic too, or else I know Zara will be loud.
Thank you everyone for coming. Naomi, especially thank you to you for being here and sharing your personal stories. And it's delightful to see you again in person. And we hope that all of you attending can fill out the survey quick. It'll just take a couple of minutes before you leave. And the link to that is in the chat box. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Naomi.
Thank you. Fill out the survey, it's important, okay? Thank you.